The ultimate goal and most important step of the cold call is closing the prospect. And my recommendation to improve your ability to close the prospect is to focus more on simply closing the prospect on talking more, whether that's talking more on another day by setting an appointment, scheduling a meeting, or talking more right there on the phone. And one of the ways to make closing for talking more much easier is by simply being good at finding a reason to talk. So on your cold call, being able to uncover and find a reason and a justification for the prospect to talk more with you will not only make you a better closer, it will make closing easier. And one of the best ways to find a reason to talk more is by asking good questions. So asking good questions will uncover that reason to talk more and will make us a much better closer. And that's what we're going to talk about here today. We're going to help you with knowing what questions to ask. In a lot of cases, we can't tell you exactly what questions to ask. We'll give you a process for you to create the optimum questions to ask for the products and services that you sell. But it doesn't just stop there, because when you ask your questions, the prospect is going to say something with some sort of response. And another key to your success is how do you respond to the prospect's response? And we will actually provide a very simple process that you can implement to improve your ability to know what to do with all of the different prospect responses that you're going to get to your questions. Now, all of this builds on a key concept that I truly believe in, which is the best salesperson is the one that asks the best questions. I think that most of us, when we think of how can I sell more, how can I close more deals, we often take a step back and try to think about how can I describe what I sell to make it more attractive, to build more interest. And I think the better place to put that energy, instead of thinking about how can I talk about what I sell, instead think about what questions can I ask prospects? What questions can I ask to learn more about the prospect? What questions can I ask to get the prospect talking more? What questions can I ask to find a reason for the prospect to talk to us more? And that's what we'll talk about here today. So in order to make it more clear what questions you should ask when talking with prospects, and more specifically when cold calling, what we do is we categorize all of the different questions you should be asking into very clear different categories. And so the first category is pain questions. Questions that ask if the prospect has the pain that your product or service can help with. Current state questions to ask what the prospect is doing in the area where you have something to sell. Desired state questions to identify what direction the prospect wants to go in the long term. Organization questions to learn about the different people on the prospect side in terms of different levels, decision makers, different departments. Need to purchase questions. Does the prospect want what you sell, or do they truly need what you sell? Ability to purchase questions to identify, does the prospect have the funds or the money in order to purchase what you sell? Authority to purchase. Does your prospect have decision-making power and the authority to say yes and purchase your product? And does the prospect have the true, genuine intent to purchase from you, or are they leaning more towards your competition? These are just a few categories of questions, and by no means should we ask all of these on a cold call. Not only is there not enough time to ask a lot of these, but it also doesn't make sense to ask a lot of these questions on a cold call. And to understand which questions you should ask and which ones you don't need to, let's talk about 3 goals for the questions that we're going to ask during our cold calls. And the first goal is to ask questions that just get the prospect talking. So instead of you doing all the talking on the cold call, you can make it more balanced, get the prospect engaged, and that can help you to establish the cold call. The second goal is, like I said, to find a justification in talking more so that you can close the prospect at the end of the cold call. And the third goal is to ask questions to identify if it even makes sense to keep talking. I truly believe that as a salesperson, one of your best resources is your time. So you don't want to waste time scheduling a meeting, an appointment with a prospect that it doesn't make sense for you to talk. So the questions that you ask on a cold call can help to identify if it would be a waste of time to continue moving forward, and help you to identify when to walk away. So with those 3 goals, it's really easy for us to look at all of these different questions and identify that it only makes sense on our cold calls to ask pain questions and current state questions. These 2 sets of questions will accomplish all 3 of those goals and will help us to learn more about the prospect, get them talking, help us to find the justification in talking more. While these other categories of questions are very important, We don't need to ask any of those at this point. And with that, let's focus on these two categories. And I can't provide a list of questions for you to ask in each of these categories. These will be unique for each product and service. But what I can do is I can provide a process that you can use to create your own questions. So here's a process that you can use to create your own pain questions. And here's a trick. If we want to come up with good pain questions, the starting place is to create a list of pain points that your product or service can make go away. Once you have that list, for each pain point, there is a question or two that you can ask to see if the prospect has that pain point. Just to give you a very simplified example, if you sell a product that helps someone to sleep better at night, then a pain point is tossing and turning at night and can't get a good quality night's sleep. If that's a pain point that you help to solve, then a pain question to ask is, how many nights a week do you find yourself tossing and turning? Or how do you feel about the quality of sleep you get every night? Those would be pain questions for that one pain point. So the process here is brainstorm the pain points, and then for each pain point, come up with a corresponding pain question or two. Now, regarding current state questions, as I mentioned, current state questions are to find out what is the prospect doing in the area where you have something to offer. Another very simple example of this would be if you sold cars, current state questions would be to ask a prospect, do you have a car today? What are you driving? What year is it? Do you own it? Do you lease it? How much money do you have left on it? How many miles are on it? How many family members do you have that you currently need to transport in your vehicle? So as you can see, depending on what you sell, the current state questions are totally different. And since I can't tell you what questions you should ask, what I can do is provide a list of areas that you could ask about. So regardless of what you sell, you could ask a current state question to identify, is the prospect currently purchasing, or do they currently own what you sell? Who are they purchasing that from? What have they purchased in the past, or what are they currently using? You might want to ask about the people on the prospect side, people in the organization. You might want to ask about any existing contracts or expiration dates. There might be sizing type of questions. How many sites does the prospect have? How many employees does the prospect have? How many systems is the prospect using? There might be good performance type of questions to ask. If you sell something that is technical, what is the current performance of the current systems? You might want to ask, when was the last time the prospect considered other options or looked at purchasing what you sell? Now, that's not a comprehensive, complete list of current state questions, but that is a guide you could use to create some of your own current state questions. So what I showed you there is a very quick process you could use to develop your pain and current state questions, and then you could use those questions when you make cold calls. Now, one problem with that is that you might not have a list of pain points in front of you, or might not be able to create a good list of pain points, and that can create a problem when creating your pain questions. So if you find yourself in that place, we actually provide a more thorough process to help you to arrive at good questions to ask. And it actually starts way before that, with starting with the product or service that you sell. So brainstorm key details, key features about what you're selling. And from those details, you can start to think about, okay, who am I selling this product or service to? And in this case, it might be, who am I cold calling and who am I talking with? And once you identify those two details, then you can arrive at a list of benefits. What are the improvements this product provides the person that I'm talking to? And so then you arrive at a set of value points. And by the way, those value points can change when you change the person that you're cold calling, in terms of calling different industries or different people in the organization. But once you have a list of benefits that your product or service can help with, here's the trick. Each of those benefits corresponds with a pain point. It's actually an inversely correlated relationship, meaning each benefit leads to usually an opposite pain point. And what I mean by that is that when you make something to work better by delivering an improvement and creating a benefit, usually a problem starts to go away. So for each improvement, there is an opposite problem or pain point or concern. So if you have a good list of benefits, you can create an opposite list of corresponding pain points. So if you want to be more thorough or are struggling to create your pain points, here is a more thorough process to arrive at those pain points and those pain questions. This is actually our sales message creation process, and I'm not going to go into that in any more detail because we actually have a video that goes through that complete process step by step if you haven't watched watched it. And if you haven't watched it, you can access it on our YouTube channel. Go to the Smart Sales System playlist, Sell Smarter, Not Harder. Module 3 is sales message, and that will take you through that full process step by step and help you to create your sales message. Now, we also talked about a lot of categories of questions that we're not going to worry about for our cold calls, but you might be curious or wanting to know more about those questions also. And you can learn about those also on that same playlist. Module 12 on qualifying and module 13 on appointments goes into more detail on those other categories of questions. Now, when you go through our sales message creation process and when you go through the process to create your questions, that will help you to create what we call building blocks. And you can use those building blocks to create your cold call script. And so as you can see here, the centerpiece of our cold call script is our pain questions and our current state questions. And this cold call script actually aligns with a full cold call process that we provide, which starts with opening the call, sharing the purpose for the call, doing a sales takeaway, asking questions, sharing pain points, sharing some information about us, going for the close. Now, what we're going to focus on here today, because we're talking about asking good questions, we're only going to focus on the centerpiece of that process, which is asking questions and talking about pain points. If you're not familiar with the full cold call process, you can also learn about that in another training module on that same playlist. Module 6 is on cold calling, and that video goes through that process from beginning to end in more detail. But now, if we get back to just the centerpiece of that process and asking good questions, that process starts just after performing a sales takeaway, where you might say something like, but I'm not sure if we can help you in that way or not. And that's why I have a question or two if I could ask you real quick. And this is where you start to ask your questions. And you could lead with asking your pain questions. So this is where you might say something like, if I could ask you real quick, how important is it for you to get more revenue out of your website traffic? So that's an example of a pain question. And you would insert your pain question at that point. And as I've mentioned, this is also where you could ask current state questions. What platform are you using? How is it currently working? Who are you currently working with on that? So now what I would say to you is whether you ask pain questions or current state questions first is up to you and could be dependent on what you sell. I believe in most cases, it's best to lead with your pain questions. I think those are really good at helping you to achieve those 3 goals of finding a justification and talking more, identifying if it makes sense to talk more, getting the prospect talking and engaged. But in some cases, it makes sense to lead with your current state questions. An example of when that might make sense is if you sell something that is fairly commoditized, something that just about everybody uses, everybody has, and the person you're talking to regularly purchases what you sell. In that case, it might be good just to lead with, what are you currently using today? Who are you using? When was the last time you purchased it? How is everything going with your current blank regarding what you sell? And then once you identify those details, then you could bounce back to asking some pain questions around, how's it going? Do you have any concerns with this? How important is it for that? So it's kind of up to you whether you ask current state questions or pain questions first. You can also mix them together and bounce between them. Now, as you can see, there's a lot of questions here. You certainly don't have time to ask all of your pain and current state questions. A cold call is about 2 to 5 minutes. So you really have enough time to ask between 3 to 4 questions. If you ask more questions than that, you're either dragging the cold call out longer than it should be, or you progress to more of the next step in your sales process, which might be talking more. You've actually just sort of progressed into a longer conversation and have evolved outside of the cold call. Now, as I mentioned, you're going to ask these questions, and for each question you ask, the prospect's going to have some sort of response. So a very key thing here is knowing how to respond to those responses. And while you might have a small set of questions that you ask again and again, the responses that you get back could be very different. So knowing how to respond to all of these different responses will be key to your success. And while that might sound complex because you can get a wide variety of responses, we simplify that by categorizing all of the different responses you get into 3 categories. So the first category is a hot response. This is where the prospect has a problem or pain point or concern where you have something to offer. So this is kind of like hitting a jackpot at a casino where the lights lights are flashing and there's a siren going off. You found a match. You're trying to find a justification in talking more, and the prospect's answer identifies that there is indeed a reason to talk more. Going back to a previous example, if you sell something that helps someone to sleep better at night, this would be asking a question and identifying that the prospect is not sleeping well. The next category for the different responses that you can get back is a neutral answer, a neutral response, and this is where things are okay, or that the prospect does not know how things are. In other words, things aren't bad and they're also not great. So using that same example, this would be where the prospect says they're sleeping okay, or they don't really know how they're sleeping. They're not tracking that. They don't have that information. And that can happen a lot in the real world where you ask pain questions and the prospect does not know whether they have that pain or not. And that would be more of a neutral response. And the third category is a cold response. This is where everything is good or great. So this is pretty simple. You ask a prospect how they're sleeping at night and they say they're sleeping like a baby. This answer shows you that they don't have the pain that you're looking for, that they're doing good or great in the area where you have something to offer. Now, since there's a wide variety of answers that you can get back, it's fairly easy to hear the answer that you hear from the prospect and real quickly categorize it as either a hot response, neutral, or cold. And what that allows you to do is when you are able to real quickly categorize it, you can easily make a decision on what to do next. For example, if you hear a hot response, which is like hitting jackpot at the casino, you could progress ahead in the cold call process and in your script. In other words, if you have a set of pain questions and you ask a question and you identify pain, you do not need to continue to ask more pain questions. You can skip ahead and go for the close. Although before you go for the close, in this cold call process, you need to go through the step of sharing some information about you. This is what I refer to as the pre-close. So yes, we're skipping ahead to the close, but before we go for the close, we want to build a little bit of interest, and that can help us to close more easily. And so what that might look like is you ask a question, they say, it's not great, could be better. Okay. Well, I tell you what, based on what you shared, it might make sense for us to talk in more detail because that's the type of thing that we help with. And then you go on to share information about your product or your company. And then after you share that, you go for the close. But let's say that you ask a pain question and the prospect says, no, we're doing pretty good in that area. Or the prospect says things are okay, or I'm not sure. When that's the case, you have a couple options here. First of all, if you have more questions to ask, you could continue on to ask another question in an attempt to get an answer that's better in terms of finding pain and finding that justification for talking more. But after you've asked a couple questions, if all of your questions and everything you're talking about the prospect is either neutral or cold in terms of responses, then you could skip ahead to the next step in the process, which is sharing pain points. And that might look something like, well, sounds like you guys are doing pretty good, because their answers are saying, well, we're doing good or we're okay. And then you can go on to share the pain points that you're looking for. So basically what we're doing here is instead of asking questions that look for the pain that we can help with, at this point, we're just going to be more direct and share the pain points that we can solve with something like, well, it sounds like you guys are doing pretty good over there. I tell you what, we work with a lot of small businesses and they often have challenges with needing to get more revenue out of their website and also needing to increase website traffic. Are you concerned about either of those areas? Or are you saying you guys are good with all of that? At this point, you're going to get some sort of response from the prospect. And either the prospect at this point still confirms that they're doing great, or what you've said here in the symptoms and pain points that you've shared triggers something new with the prospect that they identify, no, that is a concern. And you can categorize the response you get here in those same three categories of hot, neutral, or cold. And with that, if you get a hot response, you can progress to the pre-close. You can progress to the close and then go through the pre-close right before that with the same type of transition, which is, well, based on what you shared, it might make sense for us to talk more. Now, if you get a neutral response to your pain points, you do have the option to bounce back to your questions. Maybe there are more questions you haven't asked yet, or maybe you asked your pain questions and you identified there's no pain. You could bounce back to ask current state questions at this point. Or if you share the pain points and the prospect says, no, we're good with all of that, what you could do is you could begin to walk away. Because what you've done at this point is You've asked some questions, did not uncover a need and pain and reason to talk more. You shared the pain points that you help with and that you're looking for. The prospect is still good. So not only is the prospect not giving you anything that you can close with in terms of a justification and talking more, it might legitimately not make sense for you to spend your valuable time talking to the prospect. And you could begin to walk away. Not just walk away, but walk away with confidence that you're not walking away from an opportunity prematurely. You could walk away knowing that you've disqualified this as someone needing what you sell and being a qualified prospect. Although if you just want to be persistent and try to schedule a meeting with every prospect that you talk to, you could still progress to the pre-close and share some information about you and try to build interest and still try to go for the close. But as you can see here, those three categories make it much more simple to identify what to do based on the prospect's response. And this works with all of those different responses that you're going to get. And in fact, you might not even understand the prospect's response in terms of what they're talking about, but you could still identify that what they said is a hot response, a cold response, or a neutral response. That's pretty much it in terms of that centerpiece of the cold call process. Now, like I said, if you're not familiar with that full cold call process, I'd encourage you to watch that other training module and go through each step of that process. But hopefully in this video, we provided at least a tip or two that will help you to get going in the right direction. And if you did find something helpful in this and you want to return the favor, very easy for you to do. Simply like, comment, share this video, subscribe to our channel. Any of those help us tremendously and none of those cost you anything. If you like these tips, you may want to follow us on any of these social platforms. We post daily sales tips on all of these, so be sure to follow us. If you like this and you want more, everything I've shown you here today is part of what we call the SMART sales system. SMART stands for sales messaging and response tactics. So we help salespeople to be better salespeople and sell more by starting with creating a good sales message that clearly communicates how they help and builds interest and grabs the prospect's attention. And I showed you a little bit of that here today, where you could use our sales message process to create your questions to ask when you're cold calling. And we call it a system because it's a structured step-by-step system that you can actually implement for yourself or for your sales team, with the foundation being that sales message. Once you have that foundation, that can create those building blocks, and that can advance you to level 2 because it makes it real easy for you to mix and match those blocks to create different cold call scripts, email messages, voicemail scripts, and whatnot. And then once you have all your scripts and sales tools, then you can progress to level 3, which is the how-to. So as I showed you here today, those blocks create your cold call script, and that cold call script aligns with a cold call process, and that's part of level 3. Now, as I mentioned, all of this is on YouTube on this playlist, the Smart Sales System, Sell Smarter, Not Harder. You can actually learn and implement the Smart Sales System for free. The reason why we give that away for free is because all of this does align with a product that we do sell called Sales Scripter, which is actually a software application that aligns with all of this. For example, Sales Scripter aligns with level 1 because there's an area of Sales Scripter called the Sales Message Builder, which is basically software that will take you through the step-by-step process to create your sales message. The software aligns with level 2 because it provides a sales playbook, which is a library of sales scripts and emails and voicemails, and all of those templates fill in with your sales message. And Sales Scripter also aligns with level 3 by providing full CRM functionality, email automation, and an upgrade from there would be, certainly I'm available to help with consulting hours. I help clients to create their sales message, create their sales scripts and emails, help them with execution. If that's interesting, but you still don't know what to do next, you may want to check out my book, The Smart Sales System, Sell Smarter, Not Harder. You can get it on Amazon here. I'll put a link in the description below. That's pretty much it. Hopefully this was helpful. If you want more information, the best place to go is salesscripter.com. You can go there to get more sales tips, videos. There are ebooks you can download for free. If you have questions on the product of Sales Scripter, there are plenty of demo videos and product information. If you want to contact us, that's the best place to go. You can get our email address, our phone number. You can contact us through a chat feature on the website. Hope this was helpful. Thanks for being here, and we'll see you on the next video. Have a great day. Take care. Bye.